chasing a feeling.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. This is your host, Tara Martini, along with the fabulous Becky McNattin. We are glad to have you listening as we live and share stories of mental health.
Okay, so Tara, I'm taking a deep breath as we start the show today.
All right.
Because we're talking about a topic that I feel like is going to be a constant call out to me and maybe to you.
Probably.
And probably to our listeners. We're processing all things boundaries today.
Such a big word.
And it's a super important topic to discuss because boundaries and mental health have a very direct impact on each other. The whole concept of boundaries is enormous, and so to really think through it all, we have guests Robin Melville and Amanda Sullivan here to talk about the topic too. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
We are thrilled to have you weighing in today with us on boundaries, and all four of us in this room right now are therapists, and we talk about boundaries every single day, perhaps multiple times a day.
For sure.
So I want you each to weigh in. What are boundaries, and how would you define them?
I'll go first.
Yeah, please do. Jump in.
I'd say boundaries are what you use, kind of what you rely on to protect yourself. I like to think of it kind of like a little bubble around you of like, that's your boundary, as a visual.
Yeah.
But we'll get into, the different ways to do that, but just something that you have in place to rely on to keep you safe.
Okay. Sure.
Which is a good way to look at it as far as if you think back to the first time boundaries are taught. When I think of my work with preschool children, it's that physical boundary. And we will actually say our personal bubble.
Our personal bubble.
Yeah.
And so it's that whole piece of it growing from that physical bubble of, that is our personal space. We don't let people go, inside of that. And then how do we help the preschoolers communicate that is our personal space and that we have a right to have that be our space. And then as they're evolving and growing into adulthood, then what does that look like?
Sure. Awesome. Amanda, what would you say?
Yeah, I kind of define boundaries as like limits or expectations we have around our experiences in relationships. And that can be our relationship to other people or our relationship with ourselves. And so I kind of think as boundaries being both external and internal. Like, what are the boundaries I have in terms of how I'm spending my time, things like that. And what are my external boundaries in terms of like what I expect in my relationships with other people.
That's a great way to look at it, that external and internal. And also, I think boundaries are the way in which we meet our needs in that. And how do we do that?
Right. That identification of what I need physically. You talked about physical bubble or physical space. What do I need psychologically or emotionally? Amanda talked about relationally. I think of it as boundaries help create the container or framework. If we think about construct, it's how we then exist in our world. And we could use all sorts of metaphors. Could use bubble.
Yep.
But there's lots. How would you see, or how do you all see these showing up as a topic in your work every day?
I think it shows up every day,
Yeah.
and almost probably most sessions with clients, again, because it goes back to both our internal and external relationships. So it comes in regards to our relationship with ourselves and our relationships with other people. And so I think we're talking about boundaries a lot, whether it's what we're expecting in our relationships or, our boundaries internally, like how am I engaging in my work? How am I engaging in my family? Those types of things. So I think we talk about boundaries, whether or not we use the word, constantly.
Yeah, we do.
Well,
And it also looks at all the things that Amanda said, and also the simple, and this could be applied to, I think, any workplace, is the boundary of how many clients am I taking on, right? If you don't set a boundary within yourself, right, you could have 12 clients a day and just
Workload.
Right.
Workload.
And that could apply to any workplace.
Fascinating topic. We're going to take a short commercial break right now, but stay tuned as we dig deeper into what boundaries are and even a quiz to assess if you might be someone who struggles with them. Thank you for listening to Feels Out Loud. We'll be right back.
In a world full of strangers, you don't know that's right.
Welcome back to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. I'm Tara Martini with Becky McNattin. Let's dive right back into our discussion on boundaries.
Okay, so we've talked about what people define boundaries as. What would you all say is the impact of boundaries on mental health and wellness? We said we talk about them every day and we work in the mental health sphere. So what would you say is the impact?
I don't know if you could. I mean, to me, it's kind of like mental health. Your mental health is almost based on your boundaries and how you uphold them. Like Amanda was saying, internally and externally. How things affect us, how things like impact us is determined by our boundaries, which then determines kind of our state of mental health.
Even because part of what you're referencing makes me think about part of boundaries is knowing our limits and being able to back something up before that. And so if we have extended beyond physical or psychological or emotional limits, we experience fatigue, burnout, hopelessness, high anxiety, things like that.
Yeah. It's kind of like you can't pour from an empty cup.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and if we go off of, Robin, what you said about protecting ourselves, it is that concept of if we are doing that, then by protecting ourselves, then our mental health, we're improving our mental health. If we don't have the boundaries and we're not able to protect ourselves, then it's going to have a negative impact on our mental health because we don't have those protective factors for ourselves.
Yeah. I totally agree with you guys. And I also think that sometimes setting boundaries is so challenging that it causes distress for people in the short term.
For sure.
And causes anxiety, it causes guilt, which I know we're going to jump more into. So I think that there's a difference between what is like the long-term gain from boundaries versus short-term gain, which is something I talk with people about constantly. Like what is uncomfortable right now might be the thing that I need to do on a long-term basis that's going to help me tomorrow, a week from now, a year from now, but it doesn't feel good in this moment.
For sure. Well, I said this was going to be an episode of full call out to me. I feel like you just spoke to my soul. And yes, the answer to that is they're really hard. They are really hard. And even saying guilt can come with saying we have to have them.
Yeah.
And being let down or disappointed with other people not observing them necessarily. So there's a huge hardship in acknowledging and identifying them. Yeah. Why would you say they're such a hot topic, Amanda? Why are they such a hot topic?
Well, from my perspective, as I think a millennial who digests a lot of podcasts and a lot of social media, I think that there has been a lot in kind of that type of media around what boundaries are. And so I think a lot more people, and this concept of self-care, and I think boundaries and self-care are so interconnected to each other. And so we're absorbing a lot of content, I think. Books, too. A lot of the clients I work with are constantly engaged in this type of self-help stuff. And so there's a lot of information that people are receiving around this concept of boundaries. And I think, unfortunately, I think a lot of the content is good. And I think sometimes it's also maybe not nuanced enough, or it doesn't directly, or we're not applying it to our lives. And we're globalizing it versus taking it a more personalized approach to what boundaries look like in our life.
And Amanda, I think you bring up such a good point because as someone in my mid to late 40s, I think growing up, it was always, or as a young adult, it was this idea of you just did everything to the max, right? Yeah. You overworked yourself, all of those different things in every facet of your life. Yeah. It wasn't until more recently where it was this idea of self-care, establishing balance. So the word of self-care, balance, and boundaries, where it was almost like you said, those words were used synonymously. And now it's this idea of it's healthy to have it. But acknowledging, like you said, it's so hard to do. Yeah. I've never had a client where I'm like, okay, have we explored boundaries? And the person go, oh, that's so easy. Yes, let's do that. Right? It's like, ugh.
I also think that there's something about like the socialization, like Tara, you were mentioning, like the difference in maybe the period you grew up. A lot of times, particular here, like be polite, and the way like you're socialized as a little kid kind of teaches you how you're supposed to show up for other people. And so as we start to kind of move towards challenging gender norms. It's kind of like you have to have those boundaries in place. And so, like, let's pause a moment and reflect on, like, am I doing this for me or am I doing this for someone else? And where's the boundary?
Totally. Well, on that, reflecting, I want to think about some myths around boundaries because I have a thought that that's in part why it's such a hot topic, that society has created some myths that we perpetuate and that aren't necessarily true. And I'm going to list some myths around boundaries, and I would love for you all to weigh in. Boundaries are selfish and rude. Well,
Robin's going to provide the sound effects as well.
Boundaries are selfish and rude. People won't like you if you set boundaries. Setting boundaries makes you not dependable. So if you're going to be dependable, you need to be boundaryless. Boundaries are ultimatums. If I set boundaries, people will hurt me and I will be hurting others. So boundaries are hurtful. Boundaries are angry actions. Boundaries are set in stone and need to be permanent. I've heard that many times, that if we have a boundary, it's a permanent boundary. That is what is forever. If we set boundaries, we are seeking drama. And another myth that I've heard just recently, setting boundaries means we're telling someone what to do. Wow. Just heard that 2 days ago. So as you heard the list, you three, what thoughts came to mind? Amanda, you go.
Well, I think these are so helpful in terms of myths because I hear the same thing. And I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier about nuance. Like, I think that sometimes, unfortunately, when we are talking about these hot topics and we see a 30-minute clip or a 30-second clip, on like Instagram or TikTok, we're not getting the nuance around what it means to set a boundary that is quote unquote healthy. And this idea of boundaries exists just like everything else you guys talk about at different intensities and on a spectrum. And so we'll talk about that more, but maybe having really rigid boundaries maybe does sometimes feel rude to people. And maybe sometimes, this one about setting boundaries makes you not dependable. I think that's very interesting because I think setting boundaries makes me more dependable.
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, I don't get it.
Well, a boundary might be, I can't help you move on Saturday.
Yeah.
I can't help you move on Saturday, or I can't pick up your child and do you a favor, neighbor. We are not carpooling.
Right.
Doesn't work for me. I can definitely see how the idea between and you kind of reference this, Tara, that for those of us who are raised as nurturers and caregivers, the idea of having a boundary sets a limit that gives the connotation of I'm not available for you. Which can come across as I'm not dependable. And maybe you'll stop asking me to do things.
Valid.
And wanting to show up that way. So a personal boundary means there is a limit there.
Right. Well, and I think it always goes back to considering what the other perspective is, because maybe I can't help you move because I actually already made another commitment to another friend who has something going on. But I don't necessarily need to give you all of that information. One of my favorite quotes is like, no is a complete sentence.
That needs to be a t-shirt.
And I love that as a way to help with setting boundaries. But I think we have to know that when we do maybe go against our boundaries or we overextend ourselves, that means we're taking away from other areas of our life. So if I agree to help you move, it may not mean that I'm doing the things for my family or the things that I need to do to take care of myself, which then impacts my clients and other people that I interact with throughout the week. And so it's this constant give and take of like, what does that look like?
Well, and it's self-monitoring the idea of, is that having a negative impact on your mental health then, right?
Yep.
And just always being aware of and checking that balance between the positive and negative impact.
Yeah.
It's so important. One of the ones that I noticed and that I think very few people think of is boundaries are set in stone and need to be permanent. Because they don't have to be. They can be temporary. For in that moment, these boundaries need to exist.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean forever and always. And I think that's important to remember. Anybody have thoughts on that?
Yeah, because I think we don't also think about how boundaries differ in different relationships. So,
Totally.
someone could identify like that's a boundary in this relationship. Perhaps there's someone else that you feel more emotionally safe with, or, boundaries are dependent on who you're setting them for.
I can for sure see that. And and even having an awareness of all relationships might be a little different in what they need or require. And you're speaking to a little bit, Tara, this idea of this is the information I have right now about me. That information might change. The scenario might be new. And we might have even daily contexts of this. I'm stuck in traffic right now. I can't go help you, or I can't stop pick up dinner on my way home.
Yeah.
But that is a notation of a boundary. That isn't a permanent one.
Right.
And so, Amanda, you referenced a few minutes ago this idea of social media. When we think about mainstream media, all media in general, and I'm lumping a massive bucket together, how do you think it's influenced what we think about boundaries, both in helpful ways and maybe in unhelpful ways? What are your thoughts, Amanda?
Well, I think I've said this a few times. I think that unfortunately we take in all this information around boundaries, and we maybe aren't reflecting enough on what it means for us and for our family system or our relationships. One thing I talk with clients a lot about is how maybe culturally they have differences in how they engage in family relationships than how I would.
Absolutely.
And not judging someone or saying like, hey, you have bad or poor boundaries, and asking them like, does it work for you? Is it working for you? And I know you guys talk about that all the time on this show, and asking yourself that and reflecting on. And so I think that mainstream media sometimes makes people feel guilty that they don't have a certain type of boundary, or that they have a certain type of relationship in their life, or it makes them think they're doing something wrong. While also bringing increased awareness to this topic around boundaries. And so I think it's like all the things.
It is. It's always all the things.
Definitely my generation did not grow up with discussion about boundaries.
No.
I don't think I ever had a discussion with people about personal boundaries.
Yeah.
It just was not, it was not a concept. And so sometimes there's even a little foreignness to me on people who choose to bring them up. And I have some judginess in myself about, you shouldn't have boundaries. Because we weren't schooled or socialized that they were a thing.
Well, it's almost the opposite.
A
right?
limitation even, yes.
I mean, I was always taught as a nurturer, like, words were never said, don't have boundaries, right? Because it wasn't even a word. But it was always just take care of everyone, right?
Totally.
Put 100% into things. And so the concept is definitely has been foreign. And I'm to the idea of, like Amanda said, the idea of setting a boundary. I'm so much better at teaching the skill than actually having them.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes,
for sure. Like I was going to say, the point Amanda brought up about how it is uncomfortable, right? That to create them and then execute them, for sure. And it depends on how you grew up. It's just knowing, I will say that when you do then execute them, how amazing it is. It's just that idea of some of us, as far as society, like, and mainstream media, it just never was. But thank goodness now, to Amanda's point, I do think it has done an amazing job, whether it is news outlets or movies and social media, where it has been on the forefront of examples of women who have had stronger voices and things like that, where they're establishing boundaries and there has not been negative repercussions of it. Where so then other females are seeing it going, okay, I can set boundaries for my safety. I can have a voice. And I know that's just one piece of it, but such an important piece. But that wasn't the case when we were growing up, Becky.
Well, and Robin and I had an interesting discussion recently about how sometimes on mainstream media, terms like boundaries can get weaponized. And what you said to me was something around, I'm paraphrasing your words, but you said something around, is boundaries a way of actually promoting avoidance? And someone saying, these are my boundaries, when actually it's somebody who is conflict avoidant or who isn't wanting to have a hard conversation or who is, so it's sort of a weaponized term used in perhaps what it actually isn't, but that mainstream media taken it on that way. And I appreciated your thought process on it because I love that media has brought into play the word, but then how we choose to utilize that word. What would your response be?
Well, my mind went in two directions, so I'll choose one first. I think on mainstream media, like a lot of times, like they show the weaponization of it almost as like they're portraying characters in certain ways. So think of shows you watch or movies you watch. If there's a character with strong boundaries, oftentimes like how's that character portrayed? They're not nice. They're not, they're like the mean person in the office.
You're the female called the B word.
Right. Like
That's
I'm thinking
a classic.
of The Devil Wears Prada right now. Like boundaries, like have been queued up almost to look as though they are negative in a lot of entertainment media.
Sure.
And then I do also think to the like our boundaries used as emotional avoidance, that can also show up if people, like Amanda has been talking about, a lot of like social media clips reference the word boundaries, but in what context are they using them? And if they're saying like they're upset that someone won't open up to them, like that can sound, depending on whose side of the story you're hearing, who's going to be like the bad guy, quote unquote, in that situation. And someone could say that's boundaries, and someone could say that's emotional avoidance. And so it's all kind of like perspective and context.
Makes so much sense to me. So on that, I want to challenge the three of you to a little quiz right now. I'm going to say 10 different statements. These are yes or no statements. And you can choose to say yes or no out loud if you want to. Listeners, we're also asking you this quiz too. Around how comfortable are you in setting boundaries? I'll give you a keynote. I might be no on many of these. Are you comfortable in setting boundaries? Just so that we can end the quiz there.
Ladies, are we going to say our answers out loud or keep them to ourselves? Because I feel like we need...
I think we should go out loud.
Okay.
I knew you would say that, Robin.
All right.
So go for it.
So statement number 1, I find myself wanting to say no more than I do.
Yes.
No.
I find myself wanting to say no more than I actually do. Okay, we got a couple. Okay, I put others' needs before my own and give in on boundaries that are pushed against. I put others' needs before my own and give in on boundaries that are pushed against. Yes or no?
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Same.
I mean, it depends person, which...
For everyone.
Yeah.
I refrain from stating my needs in relationships.
No.
Oh, no.
I think saying no can lead to conflict, so I avoid it. I think saying no can lead to conflict, so I avoid it.
I think it can lead to conflict, but I don't avoid it.
I don't usually either, but sometimes with certain people I might.
Okay.
Because there might be certain people that I know will do that pushing against.
Amanda is always the one who doesn't like the yes or no.
I don't like yes or no.
She always says, it's not fair.
Yep.
I rationalize if people violate boundaries I have set.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I say yes to requests of me, even if it means sacrificing something for myself.
Yes.
Nope. I'm just kidding. Sometimes.
I please other people, even if I feel resentful about it.
Yes.
Tara's like, I'm right with you. I have a lot of yeses. Number 8, I sometimes feel taken advantage of or taken for granted.
Yep, again.
I think most females would probably say yes to that one.
Yeah.
Which is a whole other episode.
Yeah.
Number 9, I feel guilty about setting limits in relationships. Experience of guilt in setting a limit.
Getting better.
Okay. Number 10, and last one, I do not tell people when they ask for more than I can give. Silence falls across the room.
I'm trying to take that one in.
I'm trying to think about it. I'm trying to think of an example.
It would be this sort of notation of, in this moment, I have overreached my personal limit. And sharing that out and verbalizing that out loud. I do not tell people.
I've gotten way better.
So 10 statements, listeners. Those 10 statements. I find myself wanting to say no more than I actually do. I put others' needs before my own and give in on boundaries that are pushed against. I refrain from stating my needs in relationships. I think saying no can lead to conflict, so I avoid it. I rationalize if people violate boundaries I have set. I say yes to requests of me, even if it means sacrificing something for myself. I please other people, even if I feel resentful about it. Number 8, I sometimes feel taken advantage of or taken for granted. Number 9, I feel guilty about setting limits in relationships. And last one, I do not tell people when they ask for more than I can give. And if we said yes to any of these statements, as folks in this room did, it doesn't mean that you are terrible or that you even can't set boundaries, but it might be some information about boundaries being a struggle. What do you all think of the quiz?
The last one is really sticking out to me because I think there's something to be said there about, like, what are we also willing to admit to ourselves? Because it's like, maybe
well said.
I can say no if I am okay with recognizing my limit. But if it's something that I don't feel I should have a limit on, then it's kind of like that internal and external boundary.
It absolutely is. And so much of boundaries is our own acknowledgement to ourselves. I think Tara said at the beginning of this episode on what we need and how it can be vulnerable on acknowledging that to ourselves. Tara, what were your thoughts about the quiz?
For me, I think one of the biggest takeaways was, and I think Amanda, maybe you touched on it, was it made me think about there are some people that I'm really good with boundaries.
Yeah.
Okay.
Others. So it's looking at the ones that I struggle with as far as boundaries and in what ways can I improve. And also then, of course, as a therapist, I'm thinking, and why do I struggle?
Yeah, I was looking at you, right?
That particular person. And what about our relationship?
One of our favorite questions in the world. What's the function of that?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
And-
interesting, though, that you found yourself from the quiz saying, well, part of the it depends, and we were kind of poking fun at Amanda for saying it depends, but you were looking at it from this microcosm of relationship to relationship, and you were saying, in this relationship, it's a yes, in this relationship, it's a no. That's fascinating.
I had the same thought as you, Tara. I started kind of doing inventory of in my head, and it's so interesting because I think you guys, would say that I am like boundary queen. Right?
Yes, I
I
would.
would say
And
you do
I
a
think-
very good job with it.
I think that my relationship to maybe boundaries in my relationships with work or with you guys maybe look different than my relationships with my family and like the types
Right.
of boundaries that I can set. And there's like a whole host of reasons for that. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people is that in different relationships, the boundaries might look different based on the person or the situation to which we have the relationship.
For
with.
sure.
Yeah.
Yep. So fascinating.
And it does allow us to ask ourselves the question of how come? How come? And as you said, it was kind of a personal challenge on, is there something I can do about that? Is there a space for action in those relationships that boundaries could be more present?
Yeah.
Super interesting. And so, and Amanda, when you talk about kind of family of origin or maybe long-term relationships, obviously these are longer rooted in values and beliefs. So it brings up this question of, in what ways do boundaries reflect our values and beliefs? What would you say to that?
Well, I love the concept of values. And I actually this is something that I wanted to talk with you guys about because I ask people all the time in therapy, clients, like, what are your values? What is the value system by which you live your life? And so, you guys know for me that like my physical health is very connected to my mental health. And so I make a lot of, I would say that's like one of my top values in my life. And so you guys know that I set a lot of boundaries around making sure that I go to yoga, that I get my workouts in. And so my value is around physical and mental health and wellness. And how do my boundaries then reflect that value? And so I think I asked people, like, what are your values and are your boundaries or other actions that you take in your life in alignment with those values?
Such a good question.
And what kinds of answers do you hear back?
Oh, all across the spectrum. And usually people are like, well, I have to think about what my values are.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was going to say, a lot of people, I've asked clients that too, and it's like, I'm not sure. It's not something that we have at the ready.
Yeah. And so do you do that? I do that work with clients then on like identifying what that is. And then, once you can identify those 3 to 5 values that kind of are really important to you, I talk about this a lot within family systems of like, does your partner's value system align to yours? And what kind of issues might that be causing within your relationship or within your family? And then kind of reflecting on like, what are the boundaries and how can you guys maybe make compromises around what those boundaries are within your family or your relationship?
Well, and you make such a good point because if you do not know your value system, how can you create appropriate boundaries.
Yep.
That would feel effective. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, for example, if we, I'll back up for a second. If we think about it as this sort of inextricably linked relationship, because we have boundaries to live out values and honor what's important to us, values and what's important to us also are underneath our boundaries. So they are like one and the same.
Yeah.
And I'll give an example. If we value family, we may set hard boundaries on being home in the evening. We may set some hard boundaries around not doing work after a certain time because we want to be available to put children to bed. And you talked about exercise. If we value health, then we may set boundaries on exercising and making time for this. So our values are what allow, if we value health, we can set the boundary,
Right.
but the boundary also allows us to live out that value. And they are kind of required of each other.
Yeah.
Robin, what would you say?
I agree. I don't have much to add to that. I'm just thinking about how they're kind of inextricably linked. Boundaries. Values determine boundaries.
Yeah.
Boundaries uphold values.
Yeah, how would you say we could explore values to consider what our boundaries might be? Or how, if somebody comes into you and says, I don't really know what I value, how would you help them discern it?
This is so funny because I literally just came from a session where I was talking about this, and I have this like deck of cards actually that's called the values deck. And I've gone through it with a few clients. It's got like more values than you would probably be able to list off the top of your head. But we talked about how it's kind of ambiguous when someone says, "What are your values?"
Right.
And you're kind of like,
Yeah.
"Wait, what are values?" You know? And so
How do
It
we
can
define
get
that?
overwhelming.
yeah,
right?
it's like you open it up to anything.
Yep,
So
right.
I rely on those cards actually a lot to just kind of put values out there to see, which of these resonates with you.
What can you give us examples of what some of the values are?
Creativity or living independently or I'm just listing mine, but there was a lot of them. I'll show you.
Yeah.
Well, and we could see how helpful that would be
Yeah.
to start to discern, here's what's going to be important for me. And then kind of to bring it back to what you just said, Tara, if there's a relationship that we're maybe from the quiz saying, I struggle in this relationship with identifying boundaries. Think about the value or values that are at play there.
Right.
And that might help you think about how to set a boundary. So when you were thinking about, what action could I take? If we root it in a value and understand what those are, how that shows up in that relationship, maybe that gives us some direction.
I like that. Yeah, I like that.
I'm going to put you on the spot, Tara. For Dr. Henry Cloud says boundaries are the litmus test for the quality of our relationships. Boundaries are the litmus test for the quality of our relationships. What do you think about this statement?
Well, I love a good quote.
You do love a good quote.
And when I read it earlier today, I just loved that his last name is Cloud. So boundaries are the litmus test for the quality of a relationship. And I think it's so true in that if we go back to words like honoring, I think if you look at it that boundaries mean you are honoring self, boundaries mean you are protecting self, they are respecting yourself, all of those things. If you look at it from that lens, and then when you look at it from a relationship with another person, then you take those same words and you are respecting one another, you are honoring one another. And to me, that's huge because you need all of those things. So to have a boundary with each other means you are respecting each other, those things. It also, for me, boundaries, along with doing many other great things, creates clear communication.
Makes sense.
It's that piece of, and we'll talk about in another episode, the idea of a lot of people will talk about boundaries, but they won't talk about consequences. Like if boundaries are not met, then what? Well, if you set up that consequence as well as, if you are going to continue to yell at me, I am going to walk away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the person knows. So it is expected. And that can decrease conflict. Okay, well, if my partner knows that, then it becomes expected, the expected consequence. It just creates that clear communication. So then you can come back and say, remember, I had told you earlier, if that continued, I would walk away. Oh, yeah, you did. You know?
Well, I love your take on boundaries as the litmus test for the quality of relationships being a noticing of respect and mutual engagement with one another. Right. I took it from that quote from a space of because boundaries feel very vulnerable for me. Mm-hmm. So for me, the whole quote was the litmus test of relationships as it is our essence of showing up as our true self in a relationship.
Yeah,
we can be us. We can be vulnerable and express what we need, express what a limit is, and we feel open to sharing it. Yes. So for me, it was all just rooted in the vulnerability part. But Amanda, what would you say?
Well, I love everything that you both said. I think I kind of took more of the interpretation that Tara did in terms of what they mean about my relationships. But now that you said what you did, I'm kind of thinking about that also. And the people that I feel emotionally safe with, I maybe feel more okay setting a boundary, or that I know that we've been able to navigate having boundaries before.
Yeah. How about you, Robin?
It's funny. I actually took it more of the Becky interpretation.
Well, we're halvesies here.
Like safety in relationships means you feel comfortable enough to set those boundaries, which allows you to show up as your authentic self. And so you can kind of determine which relationships can you show up as your authentic self in. So that's kind of like the litmus test there. That's how I took it.
Yeah. Well, but it has me thinking about all of these ways to look at that very quote, which who knows? I don't know if Henry meant it to be so explored.
And it's okay if he doesn't.
It's
and
totally okay if we doesn't.
The beautiful thing of quotes is it's open to the interpretation of the reader.
Yeah, and is there a time, very quickly, that I want you each to weigh in, is there a time where you've noticed a direct impact to your mental health from setting boundaries? Can you think of a time?
Yes. I'm just thinking of like examples with friends where they wanted to go to an escape room, and I'm not about that.
Yeah.
And so I remember saying like, you guys can go, I'm not going to go. And then I immediately felt kind of that, oh no, is anyone upset?
Yeah,
like
guilt.
Are they going to start a separate text thread and talk about it? You know, like that guilt, and then also that fear, that anxiety of like, how are they receiving this? And I'm glad I didn't end up going to an escape room, but it certainly caused a lot of anxiety for me.
Yeah.
And direct mental health impact in a positive way. Love that. Yes.
Yeah.
Like, Amanda, what about you?
Well, I've definitely, I think, experienced what Robin has, which is that guilt, and kind of figuring out how to deal with feeling guilty that I set a boundary or being worried about how a person might respond. I think an example I had this week goes back to my value around health and making sure that I get off work at a certain time this week, and even maybe getting off early so that I could fit in going to yoga between work and a social commitment I had, kind of laying out my week ahead of time and just knowing, like, I'm not going to have another chance to go to yoga. Like, I really got to try to figure out when I can make that happen. That's an important part of me being able to show up and be a container for other people. So I think it definitely helped my mental health this week to make time to do that.
And probably felt settled.
Yeah.
And maybe less anxious even in how your week was mapped out.
Totally.
What about you, Tara?
Recently, I had kind of similar to yours of, kind of mapping out the week. And I remember we're going to do this really big dinner on a Saturday night. And I said, hey, Saturday, but this one, because I've got a really heavy week before. And I said, any other week's fine. Well, they happened to pick, of course, the one week I said no. And then I followed through and had a boundary and said, remember I had stated that is the one. It was too heavy and I'm just too emotionally exhausted to come, but you guys have fun. And they kind of gave me a hard time about not attending. But it was that idea of following through with what I had said and honoring that rather than being exhausted and going through with it for the sake of others.
Well, I love the mental health impact, positive all around from setting boundaries.
Way
So
to go,
much to think
ladies.
about here, everybody. And we're headed to a commercial break. But when we come back, we're going to talk through listener questions all about boundaries. Feels Out Loud will process your questions and thoughts in just a moment.
We are back again with Feels Out Loud, and this part of the show is where we talk through questions from you all, our beautiful listeners. If you have a question related to mental wellness, sharing feelings, or our topics for each week that you would like us to process through, please visit our website at becomingtogethermn.com and find the Feels Out Loud page to submit a question directly, or email us at contact@becomingtogethermn.com. Of course, follow us on social media as well. We really do want to hear from you and what you are wondering about.
A giant thank you to you all who have sent in questions about what boundaries are. And we chose a question specifically that had an interesting take on setting boundaries and why they might be a struggle. This person says, I feel like I might struggle with boundaries because I have reactions to people setting boundaries with me.
Such a good point.
What can I do to manage my own reaction to the boundaries of others? And I'm going to start with you, Amanda. What would you say to this listener?
Well, it's interesting because you said something very similar earlier today.
I did.
So this listener was having a similar experience to you.
Yep.
And I think, again, asking, whenever I'm having a strong emotional reaction to anything, I try to give myself some time to reflect on, like, what's causing this emotional reaction? And why am I struggling with this? And is it about this person, or is it about a core belief that I have, or something that I'm struggling with internally? And giving myself space to reflect on that, maybe before I respond to the person. Using journaling, if you're in therapy, processing with a therapist about it.
Right.
Just giving yourself space to reflect on, like, I think for a lot of people, it's because of what this says, is because I can't set boundaries myself. I don't like other people doing it. Or, I've heard from a lot of clients that I work with too, they struggle. I work with some clients who are single, and they're navigating this stage of life where their friends are having children and struggling with the boundaries that people have to have when they have young children, and not feeling like maybe they're valued in that relationship, or not feeling that they are getting, like, the quality of the relationship that they want,
right.
And kind of navigating those feelings they're having about the fact that their friends' lives are changing, and they're kind of in this maybe different phase of life.
So you're saying to this listener, managing your own reaction is first honoring their reaction. So you said journaling, processing it, recognizing that a feeling does not mean a fact. It means a feeling, and it might be from some need that you have. And if you allow yourself a space to feel about it, then maybe you'll have some clarity around thought about it.
Yeah.
I want to ask the second listener's question to Robin. And listener was saying, can we have relationships with people that have super different boundaries than us? And what would you say to this listener?
My first thought was yes, but now I need to think of why. That's my first thought. I hesitate to draw, like, a hard line and say no. There's no way it's possible. I think different boundaries might make it a little more challenging. However, if you communicate them, if you stick to them, like Tara said, like, following through on it makes you dependable. But I think that it's possible. I think it might require understanding from both perspectives, kind of being able to see the other person's. Yeah. But I wouldn't say, like, no.
Well, it does lead to that first listener's thought of, we may need to manage our own reaction or respond to our own reaction about another person's boundaries, particularly if they're different from ours. So I hear you saying things like, well, a relationship can navigate difference if there's respect and communication about needs, but an acknowledgement that they're going to be different from mine.
Yeah.
Right.
Likely, one of my thoughts to this listener was, likely you already have relationships with people who have super different boundaries than you, because that's the uniqueness of humanity. And Tara is shaking her head yes. What would you say, Tara?
Well, because I think it's super rare that you would be in a friendship or relationship with someone and have the exact same. My initial reaction to Robin's statement was, yes, you can make it work, but the biggest thing is that if someone has really strong boundaries, be really careful about growing resentful of those.
Wow.
But definitely can be different.
Yes. And we're at the end of our show for today. Thanks for listening this morning. Join us next week as we talk through setting and adhering to boundaries. In the week ahead, be kind to yourself. Remember that connection fosters wellness, and your voice is one the world around you needs to hear. Share yourselves, friends.